Hey, it's Stu, and this is a book haul video. I recently went to Portland, Oregon, and I visited one of my favorite friends at the library, Bookstops, and certainly my favorite library, which is the Multnomah Portland Central Library. It's beautiful in there, and I visited a little thrift store kind of in a neighborhood that I'd never heard of before, and found there was a lot of books in translation, but found a couple of things that I wanted to take home. The first book I'm going to talk about is Salman Rushdie's Quixote. This, in a sense, was a free book because they were like, if you spend $30, you get $5 for free. And I was just under $30, so I bought my friend who was with me and who isn't a reader a book that he selected, and then because it was like right at closing time, chose this out of several good options. I'm about to read my first Salman Rushdie book. I've never read this author before, and I don't think any author's for everybody, but I have some confidence that I will like Salman Rushdie. I mean, obviously, because this will be, my fifth book, and the first one I'm going to read is in this or next week's, it's on my TBR right now, so it'll be read. This is a retelling of Don Quixote, and I liked that as a premise. I also really like this little sticker in the front. I don't know if it came with the book or if somebody put it there. In any case, I thought that this was a good pick for my free book. Okay, let me put the jacket back in place. Since I was in Portland, I thought that hauling a Chuck Palahniuk was a good idea. They're local. I think this is one of his more recent ones, and I think this one wasn't so well received, certainly as something like Fight Club, but it does have a pretty compelling, I think it's crossing into horror, using horror tropes, and then is all of the ways that, Chuck is weird in that Portland way and transgressive in his writing and his literature. I had passed this up before, so I think it was because I was in Portland that I thought, let me get this. Chuck is someone who I've read before, 2 or 3 of his books. The most recent one that I've read was Choke, and I read that probably now almost 20 years ago as well, but at least it was in the 2000s. This book was published, I think I was surprised when I looked. Yeah, 2020. So now going on 5 or 6 years ago, which is pretty recent. And yeah, I think that it has a very compelling cover, and I decided to get it. A book that I was really excited to find was Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart. I'm just wrapping up my November long pile of possibilities of Booker shortlisted, longlisted, winning authors. And because I was reading that, Shuggie Bain came up. I was interested in reviews when I listened to BookTuber's vlog about Shuggie Bain, and I just came to know a bit more about Shuggie Bain and knew that it was something that I would want to haul. And when I found it, but I had yet to see it, and maybe if I'd seen it before, I might have been a little intimidated by its size. It's only $4.29, but sometimes I just look at it and make judgments like that. In any case, I now have it. Speaking of prize, including the Booker, but I'm particularly going to talk about this one because in the next year I'm going to read, and even starting now in December, I'm going to put Women's Prize for Fiction, longlisted, shortlisted, winning. So I can just say longlisted, it covers that comprehensively. Books, because it's their anniversary year, and I will be participating in sort of like the Women's Prize for Fiction readathon, and I have a lot of Women's Prize for Fiction author on my shelf. So I'm going to focus on those and not necessarily on ones that I don't own physically. And this is one of them. The Wren by Anne Enright is, I think, 2023 or 2024, a pretty recent book, given that I own a thrift for my books. Yeah, 2023 is the publication. I think it might have been in the 2024 Women's Prize because of how their timing works. But, and this is, oh, Douglas Stewart is Scottish. And I was going to say another Irish author, but we haven't talked about the other Irish author yet. This uses poetry, and it also explores, you know, the difference between loving the art and the artists, or what that looks like. I believe English. I believe Jane Gardam is English, and this is my second Europa Press book by this author. I haven't read the other one. It is Old Filth. It's sitting right here behind my display book, which is another Booker Prize winning book. And I think this one is coming of age and might even be for a young adult audience. I'm not sure. I'll keep the books together on my general fiction shelf. But I think now I think whenever I find Europa Press for, you know, these really cheap prices, which is a couple of bucks, I feel compelled to get it. And yeah, this book will keep Old Filth company until I read one of the other. The other Irish author that I got, and also, you know, a prize-winning author, and someone that I have, and also someone I have quite a bit of collection for right here. So this is going to be my fourth book by Colm Tóibín, and I've yet to read any. I don't know if I'll like him, but I've heard, and I think Brooklyn is a good place to start with this author. And I think there's a series. It's like Brooklyn, Long Island, something like this. Those aren't the ones that I have, but and one's a nonfiction that I have on my fiction shelf because I didn't want to split up the author's works. But anyway, this also has a major motion picture. So one of the reasons I picked it is because I'm having guests who will come stay with me over the winter holiday, and they are folks who are cinephiles, and it tends to work pretty well that we have something to talk about. If I read a book that's substance, it has substance to it, and then we watch the film, I generally, like, when I see now a major motion picture, I run away from the book. I often feel like, especially if authors wrote with a screenplay in mind, that doesn't work for me. However, how could I just have talked about Chuck Palahniuk, and, you know, with a straight face, and saying that never works, because the adaptation of Fight Club, in my opinion, is just spectacular. So anyway, this might be read sooner rather than later, for that reason, so that I can say, let's find this on some streaming and watch it, or maybe I'll contact this friend and say, can you find this on a streaming source? And then I'll read it. It's not a very big commitment, so if I don't have anything else to do, it could be, you know, on a reading day, you know, read over a day. Anyway, the last book that I got from the Friends of the Library is an ARC, and I do have feelings about that. However, I wanted the book, and I wanted to support the Friends of the Library. So it's Pedro the Vast by Simon Lopez Trujillo. This is the translated work, and it's not out. Like, the actual book is in Spanish, has been published a few years ago, but the translation is going to be published next month, in the first month of 2026. This is a book that I hauled because I plan to do it in a buddy read. Since the Spanish edition has been published for some time, I'm pretty sure that my friend can procure it, read it. I'll read the English edition at the same time, and then we'll swap. And this friend likes to read the Spanish editions out loud, so he'll have the English to read for reference, and we'll read the Spanish together. That's my thought about what's going to happen with this book. Okay, that's it for Friends of the Library. I'm going to move in quickly to the thrift store. There were some great finds there. There were Oh, I mean, I'm to the point where I have a lot of books and I've read a lot of books. And to remind anybody that doesn't know, once I read them, I unhaul them into Friends of the Library donations or Little Free Libraries. I don't hold on to books that I read, with very, very few exceptions. And everything you see here is hauled via thrift, Little Free Library, or Friends of the Library kind of situation, book sales situation. And it's only here because I haven't read it yet. So people, they get freaked out about how big people's TBRs are. And if they don't use the library, I've just said, I, I'm very active as a friend of the library. And in fact, because of wanting the immersive reading options, audio options, and or just digital where I can change the font to one that doesn't give me a headache, especially the contrast, since I get headaches from weird contrasts and or weird fonts. I If it's available at my library, I check out the physical book that I'm going to read and have that as a sort of hybrid option. I got Chuck so I can get Tom, who's another Pacific Northwest author. However, this one I believe is from the Peninsula in Washington State. I have four other Tom Robbins books. I've read all or most Tom Robbins books once or twice in the 90s and maybe early 2000s. And I haven't revisited him at all in this last voracious reading journey of mine. However, I'm kind of collection building Tom Robbins. And I'm willing to admit that maybe he won't stand up to time, but he will always have a place in my memory and my coming of age. So Skinny Legs and All in this mass paperback version that I paid $1 for was so nostalgic for me because it resembled the book that I carried around in my purse or pocket while reading, on road trips. The Last of the Just by André Schwartz-Bart and translated from the French by Stefan Becker is a classic. It doesn't exist at my library, which surprised me, so I requested it. And the reason it surprised me is because I don't know the criticism around this book, actually. I just know the synopsis on the back, and this covers the persecution of Jewish people in Europe, starting with a massacre on March of 1185 through the Holocaust. And I think that especially since World War II as a war, and most especially the Holocaust and what that meant for humanity, or what the prescribed meaning that we put, as there have been multiple genocides. And I'm not trying to suggest one is worse than the other, or that we shouldn't pay a lot of attention to one. I think that a lot of that narrative comes out of context sometimes, and this feels like it gives a whole lot of context to the persecution of Jews and how something as atrocious as the Holocaust could happen, and normal people be like, it's okay, because they, for better or for worse, let it happen. Kind of along the same vein, and certainly talking about, persecution and oppression, Muriel Byrulia Jabril is a Palestinian author who she's a correspondent, and she wrote a story about some Palestinian girls in Jerusalem in 1948. And it's become another major motion picture. And could I have seen it? Maybe. I think this book is from like 2010, so it has some time behind it. It was compelling to me to have found, like, literally side by side by that other book, just to think through all of the ways that we humans interact with each other in contemporary and historical times. It's a little short read, and my library only has it as audio, so it's on my TBR now. I checked it out now with the same concept that if it's decent, I'm going to ask that friend who's coming up who will want to watch movies. That's what he'll want to do on these winter nights, if he can find it in a streaming if it's worth it, or maybe even if it's not, because we'll have something to talk about. So it's kind of like movie adaptation book club kind of thing. There I have seen several times, but because it was very reasonably priced, and because this thrift store was, its purpose was something I wanted to trust, I finally hauled A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towels, and I can see this sitting on my shelf for a very long time. It was something that I passed up hauling, and I see several by this author several times. So it's going to be some prompt or something that gets me to read this book. But alas, finally I hauled it. And then the last book is probably the one from this thrift store that I'm most excited about. This is a Europa Press hardcover, and I don't have and have never seen so far in my thrifting situation a Europa Press hardcover book. And the cover art is actual art, and it is absolutely spectacular. This is Domenico Starnone, The House on Via Jamito, and it's translated from the Italian by Una Stransky, yeah. And speaking of Booker, this was short or long listed for the International Booker in 2024. So this is going to be my second Italian translated book. I think even from that Booker, that I'm going to put obviously as a display book, because it's just too beautiful to not display for a while. And I have a lot of enthusiasm around this book. I just have a lot of books now, so I can't tell you when I'm going to get to reading it. But this wasn't, I mean, it's experimental. I don't know anything about this book, but it's not something I think that I'd easily give up, it's a beautiful hardback, like new edition as well. So even in that way, it was a stellar find at a thrift store. And that is the last book of this spectacular haul from my trip to Portland.